The XRP ecosystem is approaching a moment that is less about speculation and more about the convergence of several critical factors shaping the next stage of digital finance. To understand this, we have to start at the macro level, where global financial systems are under increasing pressure from a combination of regulatory evolution, technological innovation, and shifts in institutional behavior. Central banks are exploring digital currencies, regulators are clarifying frameworks for tokenized assets, and traditional financial institutions are reassessing how to move money across borders efficiently. It is in this environment that XRP is emerging, not because of price narratives or online sentiment, but because it aligns closely with the structural needs of modern finance. The XRP ledger was not designed to create stories, it was engineered for liquidity, speed, and integration with real-world financial infrastructure. Its purpose-built consensus mechanism allows for near-instant settlement, low transaction costs, and interoperability with existing banking rails, which positions it differently from networks that exist primarily as ideological experiments or speculative communities. When we examine the catalyst for XRP's relevance, several elements converge naturally. Regulatory clarity is no longer a distant concept. It is beginning to shape which assets institutions can integrate safely. XRP's ongoing engagement with regulators, its track record of compliance, and the transparency of its ecosystem make it a natural candidate for entities seeking to operate within legal frameworks. At the same time, the rise of stablecoins and tokenized assets creates a demand for efficient settlement layers, a system that can move large volumes of tokenized value securely and with minimal friction becomes more than a utility. It becomes an infrastructure necessity. XRP's role in bridging fiat stablecoins and tokenized assets is an architectural advantage, not a market strategy. Institutions evaluate these capabilities in terms of operational efficiency and risk management, and the ledger's design reflects a decades-long understanding of how money moves globally. XRP's relevance is fundamentally tied to its real-world utility rather than market speculation or hype. And understanding this requires looking beyond price charts to the architecture and purpose of the XRP ledger. Unlike many other digital assets that exist primarily as stores of value, ideological experiments, or speculative instruments, XRP was engineered to solve specific operational challenges that financial institutions face every day. Traditional payment systems are often slow, costly, and fragmented, with cross-border transfers sometimes taking days to settle and incurring multiple layers of fees. XRP addresses these inefficiencies directly, offering near-instant settlement with minimal transaction costs, a feature that is not just a technical advantage, but a critical operational improvement for institutions managing liquidity and treasury operations. The ledger's consensus mechanism eliminates the need for energy-intensive mining, creating predictable transaction finality while maintaining high throughput. This efficiency is a structural benefit that cannot be replicated simply by narrative or community enthusiasm. It is embedded in the network's design. The importance of real-world utility is further highlighted when examining how XRP interacts with other forms of digital and traditional assets. It is capable of bridging fiat currencies, stablecoins, and tokenized assets in ways that align with institutional workflows. Corporations and banks are not concerned with ideological purity or market trends. They evaluate tools based on reliability, speed, compliance, and integration potential. XRP's technical capabilities directly address these priorities. The ability to provide liquidity on demand, execute rapid settlements, and integrate with existing banking infrastructure demonstrates that XRP is more than a speculative token. It is a functional tool that can improve financial operations at scale. Its architecture allows institutions to move large volumes of value efficiently, reducing counterparty risk and operational friction, which are significant considerations for any financial entity handling international transactions. Understanding XRP's relevance through the lens of utility also requires acknowledging the broader market context. While other digital assets may be celebrated for scarcity or ideological alignment, XRP's focus on practical application positions it differently. It is often misunderstood, by those who measure digital asset value purely through price movement or community size. Real-world adoption, however, is measured by integration, usage, and operational impact, all of which XRP demonstrates. Observing adoption signals such as experimental liquidity corridors, institutional pilots, and system readiness provides insight into its functional significance. These indicators matter more than short-term volatility because they reflect the network's ability to solve concrete problems that existing financial systems struggle with. Ultimately, recognizing XRP's relevance requires shifting perspective from a speculative mindset to an operational one. Value emerges when a network consistently meets real-world needs and delivers predictable performance under institutional scrutiny. Price may follow eventually, but it is a secondary effect, a reflection of widespread adoption and demonstrated utility rather than the driver of significance. XRP's design, its ability to facilitate fast and low-cost settlements, and its compatibility with financial institutions. Workflows collectively define why it holds relevance today. By focusing on practical utility over hype or ideology, it becomes clear that XRP's position in the evolving landscape of digital finance is a direct result of structural foresight and operational design, not narrative or sentiment. Its relevance is rooted in what it can do, not what people hope it might do, and that is the lens through which its significance should be understood. The convergence of multiple catalysts is creating a unique environment for institutional adoption of XRP, and understanding this requires examining the interplay between regulation, stablecoins, tokenization, and liquidity management. Regulatory clarity has become a central factor in how financial institutions approach digital assets. Banks and corporate treasuries operate within complex legal frameworks and cannot risk exposure to uncertain regulatory treatment. XRP's ongoing engagement with regulators and its transparent operational model provide a foundation for confidence, signaling that it can be used safely within compliant financial systems. This clarity does not create hype. It establishes a practical pathway for institutions to integrate digital assets into existing workflows. When combined with the rise of stablecoins and tokenized assets, which require efficient settlement layers, XRP's utility becomes even more apparent. Institutions dealing with stablecoin transfers or tokenized asset settlements need a network that can handle high volumes quickly, reliably, and cost-effectively, and XRP is purpose-built to meet these criteria. Tokenization itself is accelerating demand for systems like XRP because it transforms previously illiquid or cumbersome assets into digital forms that can move seamlessly across networks. Corporations exploring tokenized cash, securities, or commodities are seeking a backbone that can provide immediate liquidity when needed. XRP's ledger allows these tokenized assets to settle in near real time, creating operational efficiencies that traditional rails cannot match. When institutions evaluate technology for integration, they focus on risk mitigation, speed, and reliability. XRP's architecture provides all three, making it a natural solution for the growing tokenized economy. In addition, liquidity management is another critical factor. Institutions require predictable liquidity sourcing to operate efficiently, especially in cross-border payments or multi-currency operations. XRP's ability to source liquidity on demand without the need for pre-funding in multiple corridors addresses a long-standing operational bottleneck in global finance. This is not a speculative feature. It is a functional necessity for organizations managing cash flow at scale. The combination of regulatory clarity, tokenization, and liquidity readiness creates a structural alignment that is rare in digital assets. Unlike networks that focus primarily on price or ideological appeal, XRP provides measurable operational benefits that attract institutional consideration. Banks, payment providers, and fintech platforms do not adopt technology based on social sentiment. They adopt it based on problem-solving capacity. Observing pilots, corridor testing, and early integrations shows that XRP is moving from theoretical utility to practical deployment. And these actions are indicative of a broader adoption trend. The convergence of catalysts amplifies the network's relevance. not as a speculative instrument, but as a functional layer in the evolving architecture of global finance. Understanding XRP's adoption in this context also clarifies why market narratives that focus on price often misrepresent its trajectory. Real institutional adoption is a slow and deliberate process, driven by operational needs, compliance requirements, and efficiency gains. Each of these catalysts, regulation, tokenization, stablecoins, and liquidity, reinforces the network's practical value. When combined, they create an environment where XRP can be integrated into systems that handle real money at scale and across borders. This is the lens through which its significance should be viewed, not as a moment of speculative excitement, but as a convergence of structural factors that enable practical, measurable, and lasting adoption. Over time, this integration will define value, as institutions recognize the benefits of speed, reliability, and liquidity that XRP provides, making it more than a digital asset. It becomes a foundational component of modern financial infrastructure. Utility matters more than ideology because, in the evolution of financial systems, real-world functionality determines adoption, while narratives based purely on scarcity, philosophy, or community loyalty often remain peripheral. Many digital assets are celebrated for ideological reasons, whether emphasizing decentralization, immutability, or the principle of limited supply, but these qualities alone do not ensure integration into operational financial systems. Institutions, banks, payment providers, fintech companies, and corporate treasuries evaluate networks based on tangible metrics, speed, reliability, compliance, scalability, and the ability to integrate with existing workflows. XRP exemplifies this principle because it was engineered for operational efficiency rather than ideological alignment. Its consensus mechanism enables rapid settlement with low fees and predictable liquidity management, features that are central to the way real money moves across borders. While ideology can inspire a community or generate media attention, it does not solve the complex, practical challenges that organizations encounter when managing global payments or tokenized assets. This focus on utility over ideology becomes especially important when considering adoption dynamics. Networks that prioritize real-world performance attract institutional interest because they provide measurable solutions to problems that legacy systems cannot address efficiently. XRP's ledger, with its ability to handle multi-currency settlements and on-demand liquidity, demonstrates the kind of operational functionality that organizations require. In contrast, networks that rely solely on narrative or scarcity often fail to address these needs, limiting their practical relevance despite popular enthusiasm. This distinction explains why some assets see high retail attention without corresponding institutional integration. They may capture imagination, but do not provide measurable operational improvements. Adoption is not driven by hype, it is driven by utility. The capacity to solve real problems consistently becomes the metric by which long-term relevance is determined. Skepticism from Bitcoin-centric perspectives often frames value debates in ideological terms. But this lens overlooks the priorities of the actual users who control substantial financial flows. For these actors, the efficiency of moving money, the predictability of settlement, and the integration with regulatory frameworks outweigh philosophical purity. XRP operates within this reality, focusing on functionality, interoperability, and compliance. Its architecture allows it to serve as a settlement layer, bridging multiple currencies, tokenized assets, and stablecoins, which is a distinctly utilitarian value proposition. Observing pilot programs, liquidity corridors, and corporate adoption initiatives demonstrates that institutions respond to problem-solving capacity, not digital asset ideology. Networks that deliver measurable utility see traction because they address needs that are critical, repeatable, and scalable. Ultimately, utility-driven adoption underscores a broader lesson about the evolution of digital finance. Practical effectiveness is what determines which networks become embedded in real-world systems, while ideology, sentiment, and narratives alone cannot sustain long-term integration. XRP's focus on speed, liquidity, compliance, and operational readiness illustrates how utility-oriented design translates into tangible adoption. The network's architecture is purpose-built to handle real-world challenges, and this focus positions it for recognition as systems continue to integrate digital assets for payments, tokenized value, and liquidity management. By emphasizing function over ideology, XRP exemplifies why practical solutions attract institutional adoption and why long-term relevance in finance is earned through utility rather than philosophical alignment. Price is a reflection of understanding and adoption, not a driver of relevance, and this principle is central to evaluating XRP's role in the evolving financial landscape. Many observers of digital assets focus on market movements as indicators of value, but history shows that true significance emerges from functional integration rather than speculative interest. XRP's value proposition lies in its ability to serve as a settlement and liquidity tool for institutions, and the market ultimately reflects that adoption once the system's utility is recognized. Financial systems reward efficiency and problem solving, and networks that demonstrate these qualities tend to see their market value align with their practical relevance over time. Price is therefore a consequence of demonstrated utility, widespread adoption, and systemic integration rather than hype, social sentiment, or short-term speculation. Understanding this dynamic requires looking at how institutions interact with the XRP ledger. Corporations, banks, and payment providers evaluate digital networks based on operational performance, regulatory alignment, and reliability. XRP's consensus mechanism enables near-instant settlement and predictable liquidity management, which are not just technical advantages but operational necessities for organizations managing high-volume or cross-border transactions. When these institutions integrate XRP into liquidity corridors, escrowed pools, or cross-currency settlement systems, they create measurable adoption signals. The market in time reflects these signals because they represent real-world demand, not hypothetical potential. Observing adoption in this way allows for a perspective on value that is grounded in understanding rather than price speculation. The relationship between adoption and price also highlights the difference between early recognition and late observation. Most participants in financial markets notice value only after integration has become obvious and operational benefits are visible. This lag means that many market participants respond reactively rather than proactively. XRP's trajectory illustrates this principle. The network's functional design and adoption progress are occurring independently of short-term market narratives, and its price is only beginning to reflect the underlying systemic importance. Recognizing this pattern requires shifting focus from speculation to operational reality, understanding that sustainable value is built on consistent performance and institutional reliance. Furthermore, price dynamics are influenced by the broader ecosystem of digital assets, regulatory developments, and macroeconomic conditions. But the foundational driver remains functional adoption. Networks that are integrated into payment systems, tokenized asset settlements, and liquidity management corridors create lasting economic relevance. XRP demonstrates this through the implementation of technology that institutions can rely on for efficiency and risk mitigation. The market response is ultimately secondary. It follows recognition of systemic utility. By observing the adoption curve, pilots, and institutional behaviors, it becomes clear that XRP's long-term significance is rooted in its operational role, rather than speculative interest. In the long-term perspective, this principle underscores a broader lesson about financial systems. Early understanding and recognition of utility provide a distinct advantage. Value is realized by those who perceive systemic relevance before it becomes obvious to the wider market. XRP's importance is derived from its ability to solve tangible problems in real-world financial infrastructure, and price is simply a reflection of that recognition. Adoption, utility, and systemic integration create the conditions for valuation, demonstrating that informed observation and comprehension of functionality are more critical than responding to short-term market movements. In this way, the network's long-term significance is a direct result of practical application, not hype, illustrating why systems reward early understanding and adoption over reactive speculation.